Ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilly. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Cheryl Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
Welcome back
for our monthly episode of our weekly podcast.
Nice.
Or is this our quarterly episode of our weekly podcast? I feel like it's
Something
been
like
nearly
that.
3 months.
Well, it's 200 episodes and we started in 2017, so do the math on that.
Yeah, and let's not and just pretend we did. Right? I'm okay with that too.
Nice.
Yeah,
How are you, my friend?
Life is good, man. No significant complaints. I'm now a fully qualified appliance repairman after our washing machine broke the other day, and I got the shits with the idea that we'd have to spend several $100s we just don't have on a washing machine. And so I went all ADHD on it and YouTubed the shit out of it, pulled it apart and replaced the water pump. And am now claiming to be a appliance repairman. So feeling very smug about that.
I did see you post that. Where did you get the water pump from?
Like some eBay store.
Nice.
Like I ordered it on Sunday. It arrived on Tuesday. It cost me like $50, including shipping. And it was literally just a case of plug 4 wires in, put the screws back in, and it was good to go.
I'd love to know, this is super off track. I'd love to know how much money companies like LG, Fisher and Paykel, whoever, make off of the spare parts to like certified repair people.
Yeah,
it'd be
like
astronomical.
It would be insane, right? Like I'm sure that, the motor, like the little, because it was just a little water pump, it was like $30 or something, and it's $20 in shipping because I paid for express. But I'm sure the company I bought it from buys them for $3 or something by the 100. And the thing is, like, it cost me $50 and let's call it 6 hours in total of fucking about trying to figure it out, watching YouTube videos, that kind of thing. But if I'd like got an appliance person out to do that, it'd be like, a $200 call out fee and then another $300 on top of that. So it's like, it's all built around this idea that you're not going to fix it. And appliance repair as a thing is not actually that much of a thing because people are just like, oh, fuck it, I'll just buy a new one.
Exactly. Anyway.
It's a fun little side chat for our powerlifting related podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I am existing, and we are getting very close to Zero New Zealand finally opening. It's been
I was going to say, that looks like such a shit fight. And every time you post about it reminds me that I never want to do that. It's great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a very, very, very overdue, over budget gym. But we're getting very close now. So that's exciting. And
the funny part is you could just like totally pull this all off as you're like just building heaps of hype about it. Like you're almost on the cusp of this is just it's all just tactics, sales tactics. We're building hype.
Yes and no, because you lose the trust of people if you're hyping towards something that doesn't exist. You got to save the hype for the end. So we're getting close. It's just hard not having a defined answer as to when the end actually is.
It's one of the worst things about the whole bureaucracy, red tape side of things, isn't it? Just the like hurry up and wait approach to things is infuriating.
Big time. Especially in councils where they have nothing better to do because the council is so small and the city is so small.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's where we're at. What are you doing with your training at the moment? I haven't seen you posting much.
Yeah, it's just been
in any way, shape, or form.
It's been a bit all over the place, to be honest, man. So it was like it's probably a bit under a year. It's about 10 months or so since I had to pull out of that bike race last year.
Yeah,
and I reckon it's probably been the least consistent 10 months of training I've had in probably 5 years. I talked a bit about it earlier in the year, having to sort of transition from training to exercise as an idea, because especially with a bunch of sickness running through our household, it's just been one of those things where it's about do it just enough to be competent mentally and feel like I'm doing some stuff. rather than having to push for something really big. I had this grand plan to run a 50 this year, but I'm just not in the shape to do it, and a long way off being in the shape to do it. But I'm also sitting with not having something to chase, which I've definitely struggled with in the past. So trying to find that as a balance point is an interesting experience, because I look back on it now as that time in the, like the end of 2015 to sort of 2018, that few years was the last time I kind of felt like this, but I was fucking miserable the whole time. Right. And I think having running and riding helps me feel more like it's just exercise. Like I'm just doing it because I like doing it. Whereas training in the gym's always been training. And so I think that's part of what I really struggled with in that period. So yeah, it's just, it has been a bit all over the shop. There's just nothing really interesting to post, It's one of those things where I always just feel a bit like, well, cool, here's another video of me riding along some road that's really boring to watch, and I don't have anything insightful or profound to say because I haven't had anything insightful or profound to say, But I've been in the gym last couple of weeks consistently, at least twice a week, which is good. And my body's starting to feel better for it. I've talked about the difference between my body hurting when I'm not training and my joints hurt and I feel a bit shit. And then my body hurting when I am training is like, all my muscles are tired and I'm sore. And that's actually quite a nice feeling when you've come from the other side of it. So yeah, it has been a bit all over the shop. We're making a bit of a push towards our end of year testing thing in December, just to give me something to sort of work towards. And because, if you don't spend the last couple of months before it gets really hot trying to get big arms, I don't know what you're doing with your life. So
wasting your life. And exactly. I look at it as like the period you're in is like, you referenced something to chase. It's like you're chasing something to chase, which is actually kind of freeing.
Yeah.
It's like,
absolutely.
You're training towards having something to train towards.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like getting in shape to train for it. Right?
Yeah.
Like
it opens up so many options and allows you to kind of relax into it and have some fun with it.
And as I said in some feedback stuff earlier today to an online client who's coming back after a really long mental health related training break, the experience of not having something to train for, not having a fixed date to work towards, and being in a position where you can sometimes feel guilty because you're like missing a session or you're not keeping up with the program for where you're at when you've got something to work towards. When you don't have that thing to chase, being in a position where there is no fixed date means you can be a lot more free to not feel guilty about missing sessions, because that's definitely something I've struggled with, is that like, I didn't get the training in today because life happened, and so I feel guilty because I missed it. And having had a lot of conversations with people over the last couple of months who are in a position where they're like, I'm not training for a specific comp, but I'm feeling guilty about missing these sessions, being in a position where I can say, hey, like I struggle with that too, but not having a fixed date means I actively remind myself to feel less guilty about it. It doesn't matter that I didn't train today because I'm not training for anything. No one cares. It's like, I'm not going backwards because I didn't train today. It's just some days you have it and some days you don't, right? So it is quite freeing in that sense as well. But actually, in a similar vein, I've been on a massive Brian Eno kick recently.
Brian Eno. I could hear everything you were saying, by the way.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure. Brian Eno is the guy who invented ambient music, basically, the concept of like ambient electronic music. So I got into like
this dude.
Yeah, I think so. It's real washed out, so I can't see for sure. But
he's an old dude with glasses and he's bald.
Yeah. Yeah, so he essentially invented ambient electronic music in the 70s and 80s. He's one of the big albums was Music for Airports.
Yeah, this guy's taken a lot of acid.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't get into making ambient music in the 70s because you were straight in 180. Anyway, he's got some really beautiful philosophies about life and art and stuff. And one of the ones that I've seen him talk a bunch on, and I really deeply felt was this idea of the human experience being a balance between surrender and control. and that for the vast majority of the human experience, hundreds of thousands of years, it's been surrender. We are a part of the environment and we have to surrender to it and exist and function as best we can while not really being the head of the ship, so to speak. And that now we're all in this really weird time in society where it appears like we've got lots of control. And so then when we suddenly don't have control anymore, it becomes this really confronting experience and something that we often rebel against. And he kind of talks about the idea that like sex, drugs, and rock and roll all comes from that surrender. It's the desire to surrender and just exist rather than being constantly at the forefront and in charge of the experience. And from a training perspective, I feel like that's the phase I'm in, right? I'm just in a phase of training in my life where I'm just kind of doing stuff and I'm letting the rest of my life dictate what happens in that as opposed to the other way around. And I've spent a long time in my life where training dictated the rest of my life, you know? As I'm sure a lot of people listening can attest to. It's the I love this and so I built my life around it thing, whereas now it's kind of the other way around. I still fucking love it. I still got up this morning, went and trained. I'm going to get up tomorrow and run. But I also drank a bunch of beers and stayed up too late on Saturday, and so didn't go riding on Sunday morning. And I'm okay with that because I had a lovely time hanging out with my friends on Saturday night, So it's that acceptance is kind of the word I'm using at the moment of this is just the wave that I'm on at the moment. And I've done it for long enough to know that I'll come out the other side and be okay with it. I'm still going to hit PRs. I'm still got progress to make, all of those kind of things. I'm not worried about it because it's not going anywhere. But even though I've been through experiences like this before, it's still hard, right? I still struggle with it, and especially being in a space where I sell it for a living. I'm real open and honest about it to people. I'm not going to try and pretend I'm some elite athlete doing these crazy things. But there's still this deep-seated obligation in my head to be posting and talking about my training all the time. And that I battle with constantly.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I think mine is tied up a little bit more in I don't even know. I've never actually articulated it, but I guess there's a huge element of self-worth, or of the value that I have as a human being, which is ridiculous because it's only relative to what I think of myself. It's a self-worth thing. And so if I don't train, I'm I've lost it, something that has been so routine and high priority is why is it not anymore? Well, it's because I've lost a part of myself in some way, shape or form, which just isn't the truth,
Yeah, man. And it's it's hard, right? It's this, and I've talked about it. For me, the eye-opening experience was getting into endurance sport and the realization that I've spent the better part of 20 years trying to prove myself and my worth to people around me with sport and training. Right? I got into lifting weights because I wanted to play better rugby. I got into powerlifting because I liked lifting weights and wanted to be really good at powerlifting. But it's always been this chasing external validation from, I'm sure I can list 100 different people, my parents, all my teachers, all my sport coaches, all the people that have spent my life saying, hey, you're not living up to your potential. And the transition into endurance sport for me was beautiful because it was this hey, this really freeing experience of I don't have anything to prove to anyone. No one gives a fuck. I'm doing this because I want to see if I can do it. And so it's proving it to me as opposed to proving it to someone else, which has been a really lovely transition because I don't feel that external pressure in the same way. And I've talked a bit about it on the podcast in feeling like I've evolved beyond the need for competition. I talked before, I'm going to run a 50 at some point. I'm at the moment, I'm aiming for maybe the start of winter next year. I'm going to run out my front door and run 50 Ks and come home. And I'll post about it because it's good business. I'd be stupid not to, but I'm not hyping it up as this big thing. I'll fucking do it on a Thursday or something a Friday because my girlfriend works from home. So I don't have to worry about picking the kid up from school, and it'll just be a thing that I do. Right. I only articulated properly for the first time the other day to a friend of mine, but I feel like these days I actually am less effective performing at my best when there are people around.
Mm.
And I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because I find it really distracting now. And I don't think I used to. I feel like I used to get a lot out of that team environment. And I think now I've come to the realization in some way that it's, again, with the ADHD, autism, late diagnosis thing and the deep-seated like self-realization that comes with like, who am I and who have I been trying to be for so long? It's made me realize that actually the thing that I'm struggling with is the being perceived by others thing, right? Like that's the bit of that I now have a problem with. And so when I'm free from that, I can actually dig into working as hard as I need to and being in that position. And that again has been a really lovely experience because now I know that I can just be like, yeah, cool. Like, no, I don't want to go and train with you. Like, no, I don't want to go and do that thing. This is like, that's my time and I need it to be my time because that's the most freeing experiences I have these days is that time where it is solely me for the next 90 minutes. And this is all that matters. It's been lovely to come sort of full circle to that over many years. And that's part of, I think, what's helped me be okay with not training particularly hard at the moment and it not being super consistent because it's all like, yeah, actually, like, no one gives a fuck. I'm only doing this because I want to and I feel good doing it. So when I give myself some slack, it's okay.
Yeah, I can't help but to feel myself consistently dragged into the old mindset of feeling like I need to display strength to stay relevant in my position of whatever, some sort of power.
Like you reckon authority. You struggle with that? I haven't competed since 2015. At least you're still lifting. I literally have to tell people regularly, like I haven't put a straight bar on my back to squat in years, like in actual years. And I don't think that makes me any less relevant as a powerlifting coach. It makes me incredibly irrelevant as a power lifter, but I haven't been a power lifter for a decade, right? So yeah, I feel you. I'm deeply aware of that experience.
It's just so interesting that like as I in my career move away from coaching, it's not that I'm getting away from coaching completely. It's that I'm ending up with a very like select group of people that I coach. And ironically, it's like the less total number of people that I coach, but the kind of person that I coach makes me feel that pressure even more.
Yeah.
To display that, okay, I'm actually
because you're suddenly the weakest person on your coaching roster by like several hundred kilos.
Exactly.
You're like, oh fuck.
Exactly.
But
and then
the caveat to that is you're also the best coach on the coaching roster, right? Like that's the thing it's an easy dissociation to make is to be like you default to I'm the power lifter, not I'm the coach in the roster.
Yeah, it's and I mean like it's very self-imposed. No one's ever made a comment of like
100%. Yeah.
What do you lift?
Yeah, exactly.
But it was interesting doing this comp a couple of weeks ago because like leading into the comp, I got hurt and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not doing what I want to do this year because I need more time to just like build into it slowly. I ramped up too quickly. Hip didn't like it, whatever. And so I decided, well, I'm not going to do the Zero Pro, but I'm going to still do the qualifier comp and pretend like I'm trying to qualify. And then I got sick and I'm like, I'm not going to do it because there's no point. But so many people were like, oh, I can't wait to lift with you. I can't wait to see you lift. And people that I thought didn't care whatsoever, like would never care. And I couldn't help to feel that pressure. But the weird thing is because I've checked out as a competitor, I actually found it, and I don't know if this was because of that or because I was just sick, but I found it really hard to switch on for the day, like to turn on and like find that little switch to be like, okay, it's my lift now. It just wasn't happening. I just felt dead.
That's definitely like a multi-pronged thing, right? Like when you're sick, inevitably it's going to be harder to flick that switch anyway. But when you're mentally and emotionally a bit checked out of it, you just like your body, it's a protective mechanism, right?
Sure.
Like your brain is subconsciously protecting you from, perceived potential injury because yourself deep down inside, you're just not there for it. And so of course it's going to be harder. And some athletes, we've all had bad days where you've been able to dig deep and find something. But I think the longer you get into this, the more you realize like, yeah, you can fight some of those days early on, but actually there are some times where you just got to be like, no, this is not the day. You just got to walk away.
Yeah.
And realizing that's, I think as of an important life skill as hitting PRs and actually making progress,
Yeah. Absolutely. That's just the skill of lifting, competing, whatever.
It's a skill of life, man. Like I had this discussion with someone the other day, like relatively new client who is mostly into like dancing and music and that end of things. And I like made a couple of different, what I thought were relatively straightforward analogies to like, hey, this is just like this thing that happens in the rest of your life. And, you know, I particularly talking about dancing. I was like, I'm sure you can tell me about days where you come in like a bit stressed, the music starts and you're just like off and something's not there and, you know, you're all out of your rhythm, that kind of thing. And sometimes you can shake it off and sometimes you can't. And I was like, that's just like training. Some days you've got it and some days. And she was like, oh. It's like, yeah, dude, it's like the human experience is universal. There's nothing special about lifting weights. Yeah. And I think this is increasingly one of my problems with the fitness industry as a whole, because it's been long enough in the episode that we got to get to old men yelling at clouds, is that I feel like there's a lot of the industry's built off people like us who are slightly less secure in who they are as people, trying to justify their existence and the money you pay them by making it incredibly complex and making it a real self-important process. Like, you can't do this without me because I'm this top tier expert sort of thing. And increasingly the conversations I'm having with everyday people who are constantly amazed when I don't give them these like really rigid expectations of exactly what has to happen all the time. Because I'm like, yeah, it just doesn't work like that. And they're like, oh, yeah, people like me have been telling you for ages, it has to be exactly this so that you keep paying. The secret is like, if you work hard enough for long enough, everything works. Yeah, you might hit some road bumps. It might not be the most effective way to do it, but it works. You just got to keep going. And when you can give people that, I think the freedom to be like, hey, it is actually not that serious. Not serious is the wrong way to look at it. It's not that rigid. It can be this very fluid, evolving experience over time, especially for the edge of the training space that is not, hey, I'm a powerlifter or I'm a very specific goal-orientated person in this one aspect of training. For everyone else, it's like you can kind of do whatever you want. And the more flexible you are with that, the better you get through periods that I feel like, you know, both of us are in a similar lull at various points for different reasons, in that you're not as physically prepared as you wanted to be. And I'm just miserable. Not miserable. I'm just not training that hard. But it's that same experience, right? It's being okay with like, yeah, cool. I'm going to go through this. It has to be a bit flexible now because both of us have done this for long enough to know that we have the ability to continue beating our heads into a brick wall because we've done it for years. But I think both of us are now mature enough to recognize like that's not the right answer right now. And you've just got to be okay with that and learn to ride that wave a little bit.
Yeah. And it's like any habit. It takes a while to break, especially if you've been in one way for a long time.
Yeah, dude, especially like the self-identity, stories you're telling yourself, habits, like those are often deeply ingrained in a way that no fitness coach can ever actually help you with, because despite many people's attempts to pretend to be, we're not therapists. We're here to teach you how to lift weights.
Exactly.
Train hard. But some people like pretending to be therapists, you know?
I don't know why. We're supposed to be reflecting on what's 3 + 4, 7 years of podcasting. What's changed in 7 years? We
Thomas can only add up in lots of 25.
That's right. Even that's hard. I stick to blues, baby.
Yeah. Blues is definitely easier. There's always the squat bar that gets me, like, or the squat bar with no collars. Like 30 or 20 I can do. 25 just really fucking infuriates me.
It raises an important point. There was a heated discussion in the Gold Coast gym the other day around one of the lifters was going for their first ever 180 kilo deadlift, and whether or not it should be 3 reds plus a 2.5 and a color, or 4 blues.
I feel like 140 squat, 100 bench, and a 180 deadlift have to be blues. It has to be 3, 2, 4. It doesn't work any other way.
Yeah, 220 you can chuck on 4 reds. Go for it.
Yeah, but 4 reds looks cool at 220.
If you're doing 180 and you're not, I told the person, if you don't do it with 4 blues, I'm literally banning you from my gym. Like, it's simple as that.
And people, he's serious.
It's not a question of whether you should or whether you can. It's like, no, there's one option. There are no other options.
Yeah, I had someone try and load 100 for a first bench with like, it was like a 20, a 10, a 5, and a 2, 2.5. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? And they're like, what? I'm like, don't. Take all that shit off. Put another 20 on there.
Yeah, done. What do you remember what you benched at your first ever comp? Like novice or otherwise?
Yeah, it was
first ever comp with calibrated plates.
170. I think the first comp I ever did with calibrated. So the first comp I ever did was a novice comp at Battle of the Gyms at Elite Physique, and I'm pretty sure the second and first sanction comp I ever did was Capo Nationals. So I think I squatted 320, benched 170, pulled 210, 220, something like that.
Yeah, nice.
Nice. That was in a shirt though, just for the record.
Yeah.
I've never been good at bench press because it's the dumbest lift in the world.
I just remember doing 100 and it being on calibrated plates and being like, this sucks.
Yeah, because it's not
a red and a 10. What the hell?
Yeah. It's never as fun.
How did you get into Equipped in the first place?
Because I discovered it was, I think, my first real exposure, like training information, and I don't have very good memory about this, but it was definitely a lot of T-Nation, like old school T-Nation, which then fed into Elite FTS.
Yeah.
And that's where I got powerlifting from. Like, I vividly remember going in to train at my high school gym, like years after I left school, but I was training with my high school footy coach. Like, I'd got back into training with him and was training with him like 5 days a week. And I went in one day having been all ADHD obsessive about lifting and training and watched a ton of YouTube videos. And I was talking to him about the Ronnie Coleman 800-pound squat for reps set. And I remember saying like something to the effect of, he's wearing this like real tight suit and like these wraps around his knees, like seems kind of like cheating, but like also it's 800 pounds. And the fact that I went from that to like the poster child for equipped lifting and multiply sport in Australia still never fails to amuse me. But that was definitely like the gateway drug was that. But I think it was probably because I discovered powerlifting through Elite FTS.
Yeah.
And the American system, so to speak. And so that was my like first real exposure on that end.
But how did you even find like suits and people to teach you how to use them?
No one ever taught me. I learned myself because I'm a fucking badass.
Man.
And I'm unteachable. It's not a good thing to brag about. In the same way that I tell people these days, I've been self-employed long enough to be unemployable. But so the first ever suit I got was a Metal Pro.
Redacted.
Yeah, true. I forgot about that. Nazis. I actually said that in a comment on people asking about buying gear recently on a Facebook post. I was like, yeah, don't buy from Metal. They're Nazis. Matt Middleton got it for me from a friend of his. And it was right after I broke my hand playing rugby. I punched someone in the face and broke my hand. In my defense, he threw the first punch. In his defense, I threw the worst punch in the world and broke my hand. But if I hadn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation because that was the year that I was like, cool, I'm going to take 6 months off because I'm not allowed to play for the rest of the season and I'll train for this powerlifting comp and then I'll go back to playing footy. And I never went back. And it was just after that. It was like maybe just before or just after that I'd got the squat suit. And so then the first time I ever put the squat suit on, I had my hand in a cast and I squatted straps down in a suit with a safety bar. And that was the point at which I did like 4 days a week squatting with a safety bar. I put 30 kilos on my squat in 6 weeks.
Nice.
And then the rest is history, as they say. So my first equipped comp was Capo Nationals 2011, I think it was.
Like Aubrey?
Aubrey. Because GPC Nats, the first one was 2012. So did that. And that was when I'd got a metal ace, so like Velcro straps. And then.
Did you do GPC Nats raw?
Yeah.
With all of us? Yeah.
Yeah, I taught
Yeah,
Matt Stenzel
juniors.
everything he knows about deadlifting that day. That's my real claim to fame because I
Yes.
was arrogant enough to suggest that Stenzel needed technique correction in the fucking warm-up room because I was a know-it-all dickhead. And I'm deeply ashamed of it, but it's funnier to claim it as teaching Stenzel everything he knows,
Exactly.
mostly because he's really strong. I'm yet to teach him everything I know about running, but I'm sure that will drastically improve his running capabilities as well.
He's doing a half this weekend.
Yeah, I know. He's already fucking way faster and way better at it than I am too. It sucks. I hate the guy. I don't really, Stenzel. I love you. But yeah, that was a lot. It feels like such a fucking long time ago, man. Like that is, yeah, what's that, 12 years ago now?
Yeah. You know, one of the craziest things, I don't know if you met him or saw him there, but Tom Haviland competed at the comp bench only.
Really?
Yeah, that's his only powerlifting competition that he's ever done.
Yeah,
I remember because I weighed in and he weighed in at basically the same time. And I was like, what the fuck is this thing? He's gigantic because he's a big boy. I've only seen him twice in real life. That was the first time. And the second time he did a technique session with me on the Gold Coast.
Is he the strongman dude? Is that the Haviland or am I thinking about someone else?
Oh, he does like odd lifts in his backyard.
Oh, that dude.
Yeah, he's like 6 foot. I don't know.
Yeah,
6,
and
7,
like
and
exclusively trains in cargo pants. Tom
Yes.
Musgrove and I were talking about that the other day, bringing it back. The Jim Wendler training oversized cargo pants and a leather belt.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm thinking about bringing it back this summer. We'll see.
you definitely should. You just need to make sure you have stuff in the pockets.
Yeah, exclusively. Or have stored so much stuff in the pockets they are permanently inflated in a way that always looks like you've got
Yes.
stuff in the pockets.
Exactly. Yeah, Tom Haviland competed at that comp. I got a GPC junior national record in the 90 kilogram class on bench press, 142.5. My butt was about a meter off the bench, but no one called it, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at, I think it was at Capo Nationals the year before, there was a well-known old face in powerlifting in the head judge's chair for bench, but was judging from the feet end, not the head end.
What?
Yeah. And judging, I think it was Bostock equipped benching. And like, Bostock's a big man.
How can you see? You can't see past his belly.
This was my point. At that point, Bostock was huge and had a monstrous gut. Dude, he called press like an inch off his chest. It was a one ball. and I said to Bostock, I was like, man, that did not touch at all. He's like, I couldn't feel it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised. Like, knowing now what I know about equipped benching,
Yeah.
you can't feel the difference between an inch off and touching. He just pressed when he was told to.
Man, there were some stonkers at GPC Worlds over the years of calls like that. Like they would literally call press before you would hit the chest, and they'd call rack about halfway up.
Yeah,
it was just like, it's like they weren't even watching. They were just sitting there and yelling the calls and hoping that it timed in well.
Yeah, I think we've all seen some pretty horrendous calls over the years. I feel like on average it's gotten better for sure, because the standard's better. But there's also still just this like really loud minority in powerlifting who just seem to want to bitch about the rules without ever actually knowing the rules. That's the one that really gets me. Like, that score was deep enough. Like, no, it wasn't, dude. Like, that was high as fuck. And it was really obvious to anyone who actually knows what the rules are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe just read the rule book, folks.
I'm waiting for the day it happens in APL with rules that are not very standard. Like, you know, someone says, how did they pass that? He's got his thumb loops on, or why'd that bench get whites? His foot moved, you know, like stuff that we've made changes to.
Yeah. It's like the time that I had someone unrack a bench on their opening bench, got a start call with really soft elbows. And so I said to our head judge at the time, hey, did you say the elbows were soft? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, cool. Well, next time, don't say start. Just say elbows and wait. Like, you don't have to say anything else. You just sit there until they straighten their arms. And I went to this person and I said, just so you know, your elbows were so soft. When you bring it out on the next one, we're going to say elbows and you're going to have to lock your elbows and we're not going to do anything until they're locked. And the person giving them the handout handed the bench out. The elbows were soft as fuck. The person giving the handout looked at our judge and was like, yeah. And the person heard that as start and so went and then got reds. And then I was like, yeah, cool. Well, that's what we expected was going to happen. And then the wife of this lifter came up to me and was like, show me in the powerlifting rule books where elbow is an official's elbows is an official powerlifting call. And I was like, it's not. She's like, ugh. And I was like, well, it's not, but it's quicker than saying, hey, mate, can you straighten your arms, please? Because we can't give you a start call until your elbows are locked. And then I said, and also, like, we don't have to say any of that.
No,
we
it's doing them in a favor.
We could just sit here in silence and do nothing and let you wait. But out of the courtesy of the goodness of our hearts, we gave you a cue. You didn't listen. You got reds. Ironically, the lifter was like, yeah, no, I get it. The wife was the asshole. It's like, man, maybe just shut up when you don't know the rules. But I don't know. People get real emotionally invested in these things, Thomas. It's a hard one, you know?
It's cool that we're still going after this many years because
there aren't many of us left.
Nah, like we got into it in the age where everyone was like, let's start a podcast. Like podcasting is going to be the big thing. I mean, it still kind of is. It feels like everyone's like, let's start a podcast kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't actually gotten any smaller, that that aspect of the industry. All that's happened is the production quality has drastically gone up, and the actual quality of the content hasn't in many ways.
But I feel like people who got into it around our time lasted a lot longer before they quit. But inevitably, most of them quit. Like podcasts at the start these days, they'll have some consistency for like 3 months and then be like, that's too hard, or I can't deal with only getting 100 views or whatever.
Turns out the trick, people, is inconsistency.
Eventually.
Take yourself 7 years to get 200 episodes. See what happens. You never know. Didn't we cross 250,000 downloads not that long ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're getting there.
Yeah. It's very cool. Very cool. We've weathered the storm. We've been through COVID. Our gyms have survived. A lot of other gyms have closed down. Like,
yeah, well, and that's actually what I mean when I say like there aren't many of us left. I don't necessarily just mean in the podcast space. I mean like in the powerlifting space. It feels like we're almost at a complete generational shift. You know, like the powerlifters I've had conversations with who are in their early 20s who like, don't know a bunch of this powerlifting lore that we know as fact because we've been around forever.
I always find it when I get like old powerlifters, as in like from 5, 6, 7 years ago, that have taken
powerlifters.
Yeah, like, that have taken a break and come back and be like, oh, so is so and so still around? What about so and so? You're just like, no.
Yeah, all those people ran themselves in the ground.
Yeah. It happens with gym members as well. They'll come back after 5 years, 6 years, be like, oh, what's so and so up to? Don't know. They left years ago. Don't know. Not sure. Yeah.
It's a funny space to, like, I say it to people all the time, you know, like I could sit here and give you a list of like 100, 150 names. We could do another 2 hours of episodes of bouncing names back and forwards of people who were going to be the next big thing, who were going to be amazing, who were amazing for a minute or two and then disappeared. Like there are just so many people who have not been able to just continually chug away at this for a really long time and disappear. And I used to get mad about it. Like it used to annoy me that people would do that. And now I'm less worried about it because everyone's going to do that eventually. People are always going to run themselves into the ground doing something like that. But increasingly, like I just started coaching a 15-year-old the other day, and his mum was like a bit worried about injuries and things like that. And I turned to her, I was like, look, he's 15. He's made of rubber. And the fact that you're paying someone like me to help him like understand what he's capable of, that kind of thing, that's more than he needs, right? Like I was 15. I got through it all right. I did plenty of dumb things. And I've said to him multiple times, like, I appreciate that listening to a man 20 years older than you tell you about how things should be and how you got to like do it on the long train, that kind of thing can sound dumb. Cause like at 15, I wouldn't have listened to me, but take solace in the fact your mum's paying me well for it anyway. And he's making he's put 15 kilos on his bench in 4 weeks and another 15 kilos on his squat voice because he's 15 and made of rubber. Yeah. And he went from just being a 15-year-old who just doesn't know what he's doing to a 15-year-old who kind of knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I forget the magic of that early experience. And I have to like be really conscious of not letting too much of my fucking miserable cynic come out in those scenarios. Like it's real easy to be the old man yelling at clouds there, but I'd much rather be the 15-year-old being like, fuck yeah, dude. And I said to him, like, man, I'll never be the coach that shames you for taking a 1RM attempt just because you feel good on a day. Like, you're 15, do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here to shame you into that, because if you'd shame me into that at 15, I would have hated you for it. And then it would have, put me in a spot where I wouldn't be here having this conversation.
Right. I'm 35. It takes almost no twisting of my arm to get me to max out.
Yeah, no, I know. You rubberest arm in the world.
Yeah.
It's absolutely one of those, like, yeah, you like, all you got to do is like raise the eyebrows at the suggestion I can't do something. I'll fucking do it just to spite you.
Honestly, just even thinking about it, I feel like I should max out my equip squat today for no reason.
I heard you couldn't.
Now I have to.
Yeah, exactly. And especially knowing that you still haven't out squatted me. So, maybe that'll be the reason I get back into powerlifting. The day you squat 412 is the day I get back into powerlifting.
Well, 410.5.
Yeah, and because it's not a record. You'd have to do that. You'd have to do that in GPC for that to be a record attempt. At least you wouldn't have to walk it out there.
I'll put a mustache and glasses. No one will know.
Yeah, it'll be a great disguise. It'll definitely be. Where do you feel like, because I said, like, powerlifting seems like it's going through a generational change. And I feel like I said this a little while ago, where, like, I feel like we're on the crest of a second wave in powerlifting in Australia. Where do you feel like let's say it's another, 7 years, 200 episodes? Realistically, it's probably going to go downhill, our productivity. Let's call it at episode 300, which will be in 7 years, because we'll halve our productivity over the next 7 years. I think that's about right.
Yeah.
Where do you feel like we'll be looking back at powerlifting, the things that are happening in powerlifting now, and be like, can you believe we used to do that? Or where do you feel like that change is coming from?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be very similar to us looking back on, like, the 2012 intro to GPC, the shift that happened there, and the sort of, like, explosive growth from there. It's like,
yeah,
that played out and stopped because of some core issues that I feel like are now getting, I don't know, I feel like we've learned from that a bit more to at least create the next wave until the next generation of people like you and I can take the reins and do things better again. Like, but I mean, that's what I'm committed to personally, is seeing powerlifting have kind of meteoric growth, and hopefully some attention from companies outside powerlifting. That's the clawing, desperate aim. I don't think we'll see much difference, like, because if you really put side by side, the differences 7 to 10 years ago to now, from a just like purely mechanical standpoint in terms of like programming styles and people coming in and out of the sport, I don't think it's that different.
No.
I think people think it's new, but they just haven't seen it play out like we've seen it play out.
Yeah,
so exactly. I don't necessarily think that aspect is going to change. I think by and large things are infinitely better with the access to information that we've got.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
just kind of confusing sometimes. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I look back on the sport we started in 2011, 2012, that kind of thing, and look at where it is now, and it feels very different in many ways, right? I think part of that is because I'm not as deeply involved in it as I used to be. I feel less like an insider in the Australian powerlifting scene than I certainly was at that point. Because of the way it was running at that point, right? Like, we were part of that core group of people that built that really big first push from that point. And I'm definitely still on the edge of that, in that I'm involved with APL and friends with you and, know all the crew, but it feels very different to me coming to like APL Nats. Like, it's not like going to GPC Nationals was in the, 2014, 15. I don't think it's better or worse. It's just very different from my point of view. But overall, the level of professionalism in all aspects is orders of magnitude better than it was. The first nationals I competed at, there was one monolift and it was on the platform, and we were told we weren't allowed to use it in the warm-ups because that's not how it worked. And I was like, yeah, cool. So I did my equipped squat warm-ups in a set of individual squat stands that my friends had to move out of the way so I could step out into my squat stance. And then the very next day, I watched a good friend of the meet director do his warm-up attempts as a part of the round of lifters before him on the platform. I was like, cool, that double standard sucks.
Yeah.
fuck you.
Yeah.
And so things like that just don't happen in the same way, you know, like it's less, I mean, there's always going to be nepotism in a volunteer based sport like this, but there's less of that me and my buddies kind of vibe to it than there used to be, which I think is a really good thing. And it's the step you need towards professionalism in a sport like powerlifting, because that's how you attract money from outside the sport, right?
Mm-hmm. It's good for growth, but it definitely feels different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I sort of liken it to when we transitioned the gym from our first location that was like 200 square meters and a concrete sweat box to the 400 plus meters we've got now. I had a few conversations with some of the early, like the OG crew, and they're like, it's different. I was like, yeah, we're never going to be able to replicate that, right? Like, not only is the vibe going to be different because the space is bigger and you're not all on top of each other in a way that is really conducive when everyone's training same things and working as a group and that kind of thing, but not as conducive when you have 50 people doing different things. And it's also irreparably changed because it had to change for me, right? Like that transition was actually more about my shift from a part of the community to the head of the community in my eyes. Like I went from being just a person in the training crew who happened to pay the bills to the man that owns the business.
Just so fucking weird to go through.
Yeah, dude. And that shift really altered like my relationship with it, because in doing that, I had to very consciously put up emotional barriers around where that line is, because it would have run me into the ground. It nearly did. Like a lockdown saved me in that respect. It renewed that barrier in many ways, but I think it feels like that in the same way, right? There's still huge pockets of people who are just fucking absolutely frothing at the bit about powerlifting. But then there's like an even bigger growth group has been the people who are just like kind of invested in powerlifting.
Yeah.
You know, like when we were in powerlifting, everyone was in it.
Yeah.
Like that was it. Right. Whereas now I feel like there's many more powerlifters, but there's probably about the same number of people who are just like all about it. The vast majority of the growth is in the quote unquote recreational powerlifter, right? Who is just there because it's a fun thing for them to do as a hobby. And they're actually the ones who are more likely to be around for 5 to 10 years than the people who are fucking chomping at the bit to do it, because they're the ones who are just like, cool, that didn't work out, I'll just try again next time. As opposed to the people who invested their entire identity in it for 2 years and then blew up.
Yeah, I was going to draw that exact same analogy about the gyms, because it's so similar. Like,
yeah,
you know, I don't know every member in my gym right now. Like,
yeah, man, that's
so
like,
different.
To me, that's a real weird experience because it hasn't happened. It's a long way off happening, but that is a real odd thing. It's like the first time I drove past someone on the street wearing a Burley shirt.
Yeah.
Turned out that it was a girly strength shirt. That person was definitely on the lower end of the socioeconomic group, and had definitely acquired that shirt from somewhere else. But then, not that long ago, Sim sent me a photo of a girly strength shirt in a Vinnie's.
Yeah,
like it had been donated to Vinnie's and was being sold at Vinnie's, which was really cool.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you about the time the cops contacted us? That woman. There was a woman wearing a Zero shirt going around using a stolen credit card at a bunch of 7-Elevens and stuff. And it was someone who had clearly never been involved in Zero. Like if I'm going off their appearance
vibe. Yeah.
And it was like one of the original Zero Southside, like black and red ones. So I dare say the same thing had happened. It was so good.
Yeah. That was, but yeah, like I think it's weird to think about, like to have this conversation now and to think about going back 10 years and having, like telling Thomas and John 10 years ago that we'd be in this position where like, I can't imagine being in this position 10 years ago, right? Like it just seems really odd to be in a spot where I wasn't fully invested in powerlifting and didn't love every aspect of it, in the same way that I'm having a real similar experience with rugby at the moment. I think I'm done with rugby as a sport. Like it was powerlifting for me before powerlifting. It was the sport I wrapped my identity around for 10 years. It was the one that, like, one of the ongoing things in my high school life was a bunch of my mates just every time I walked into the room be like, footy, because all I talked about was footy and I loved it. And I watched the World Cup last year and it just fucking broke my heart. And I haven't watched a minute of rugby. I watched 6 minutes of a Wallabies game and then switched on the Tour de France. And like letting go of that is hard. Because I fucking love rugby, man. Like, it's one of the best sports in the world. It gave me almost everything I've ever wanted. And it's really hard to let go of that. But I also just can't get excited about rugby anymore. Like, I have moved on from it in many ways, but I'm still really conflicted about that. And I feel very similarly about powerlifting, but for a very different reason.
Sure.
I feel let down by the sport of rugby. Powerlifting has come close to running me into the ground mentally and physically a few times, and that's the difference. Is I've had to choose to feel like that about powerlifting, because if I didn't, I couldn't do it on a business scale anymore. Like, if I was still as emotionally invested in it as a sport as I was to start with, it would be much harder to do the things I needed to do to make it the business that it is for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think all of that really changes, your relationship with it. We're both in the position that everyone talks about as the dream, right? Like, you take that thing you love and you make it your job, and then you never work a day in your life. And I think that is horseshit. As someone who is
harder than ever,
but also as someone who is now 12 years into this being my career, like, it irreparably changed my relationship with the thing. Like, the thing was training as an escape from life, and now training's a part of my job, and it feels like so incredibly different than it used to. And I still have a really hard time articulating that to people. Like, well, I own a gym that I'm in 6 days a week, and there are plenty of days where I just don't want to train. The last thing I want to do is go pick up the weights I own. I just want to go home. And it's hard.
The second place is not meant to be the third place.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not designed for that. And it's really weird when it becomes that.
Yeah, man. And the problem is, I've thought deeply this year, especially while I've been struggling with being consistent, about the idea of like going and paying for a casual membership at somewhere else. And then I know myself well enough to know that I'd hate that.
Yeah, because
I'd go
in of it, man.
I'd go in and it'd be like, this barbell sucks. The vibe here sucks. This machine sucks. I've got it. Why am I paying? Like, it wouldn't be a good experience for me, right? Yeah. So it's just not worth doing. But it is hard, man. You take this thing you love, it becomes your job, and then suddenly the thing you love isn't the thing you love anymore. It's this very different thing. And that's actually where having found making music's been really lovely, is I've found a thing to obsess about again. That's just a thing to obsess about. Like, it's not a thing I have to make money doing. It's not a thing I have to meet anyone's expectations on. It's just a thing I want to do. And that's really lovely. Like, I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. Yeah. And it's made me a much happier person for it.
Yeah. Yep. It's so nice as well, having that escape where, previously for us, that was powerlifting or that was lifting and training. You have that escape where the place you go, the people you're surrounded by, you don't know them really. Like, you don't know them outside of the shared interest. Whereas like, each of your members intimately, and you're not one of their peers. You are you in that situation. And it's so nice to have that thing where it's like, no one can touch this right now. Like, this is my thing.
And I had this conversation with one of the guys that owns the bike shop I go to, who I've just completely snubbed a couple of times recently on morning rides. Like, I've ridden past him, he said hello, and I've just completely blanked him. And it happened again recently. I rode past him and I realized 10 meters past me who it was. And then I saw it. I went and saw it.
Yeah, but why are you snubbing him in the first place? Do you not hear him, or are you just?
Yeah, I'm fucking blinkers on, right? That's what I'm going to say. Like, that 90 minutes that I'm riding, no one else exists.
Yeah.
Like, I am headphones in the zone, just like I forget I'm not in a video game and everyone around me has a life. And so I'm just so far removed from the reality of the thing, I just don't realize. Yeah. Because he was like, "Oh, fucking snubbed me again, you rude prick." And I was like, man, I don't think you can appreciate how little I can perceive of the world around me in that environment, because I've carved it out like that, right? Like, that's the thing for me. The release now is like riding and running, because I can't get it in the gym anymore. I can't do that in the gym, even when no one's there. Like, I was in the gym at 4:30 the other day because I woke up at 3:30 and was like, fuck it, I'm awake. And there's no one around, and I still really struggle to slot into that nice little flow state like I do on a bike or running or whatever. And because of that, I'm now like fiercely protective of that time because it's not only physically good for me, it's like mentally essential. And the more I can protect that, the easier the rest of my life is.
For sure. For sure. Love it. Is there anything else we want to add?
No, not really. I think that kind of covers it.
Because I can just keep talking. This is the longest episode we've done forever.
Yeah. We could continue to reminisce about this for hours, but then we'll run out of content to actually continue doing our bi-monthly weekly podcast for the next 7 to 9 years.
Nice. Well, thank you for listening to 200 episodes. We love you and appreciate it.
And if you haven't listened to all 200 of them, you're not a real listener, and you should go back and start with episode 0 and hear just how dumb, young, and stupid and terrible at podcasting we were then.
And kind of still are. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.